Some may find the following disturbing. Discretion is advised.
Never before in the history of sports podcasts have two men brought you opinion and analysis like these two. They speak for a city that's desperate for wins and titles, not whining and travesty. You might not agree with what they have to say, but you'll defend their right to say it. Sports fans across the world, from Chicago, Illinois, this is the Mac and Read Show.
Hello, everybody. Welcome into another edition of the Mac and Read Show. I was mesmerized by the flames. I feel like that's some new swag and a little echo on the intro there. Welcome in, everybody. Thanks to the Barroom Network for capturing us live here on YouTube. And if you've missed any of our shows, you can catch them on YouTube, on Spotify, on iTunes, wherever you get your audio-visual needs. Follow us on social media. Follow me at 311Mac. Follow Ross at Ross Read. And don't forget to follow the Barroom Network at Barroom Network. What's up, Ross?
What's up, man? How you doing?
Living the dream, feeling good, feeling great. I'm also, speaking of being mesmerized, man, this basketball behind you might trip me up throughout the show here. You don't even know where to look. I don't know which plate to look at in the first place, but this is that new swag.
No, I know where to look. I was looking for the remote to turn the damn thing on. My kid loves it.
I bet he does.
Yeah, so he turns it on. It drains AA batteries like nobody's business.
Oh, naturally. My mother has like a light now on her patio that does that same similar thing where you can, make it get dim and go to green, go to purple, and that's great. Yeah, it's good for adults and children. We have a lot to get to on the show today. We were talking Bears, of course, to lead off. One more dress rehearsal game before we get to the big dance, and Matt Eberflus and the whole organization is behind the starters playing a half against the Brownies. That's going to be fun, man, this third preseason game. We'll talk about the Bears at length and then more NFL news throughout the league. Aaron Donald swinging helmets out here. And our top five today is the top five wide receivers in the league. And, of course, we'll get to some NBA news and everything you could imagine and more. But first, let's go to the Bears, go to the gridiron. And first of all, we're a little delayed since a week ago was that Bears preseason game, second preseason game. We'll get some thoughts from Ross in a minute on that. But probably the biggest relief for a lot of Bears fans, and, Ross and I have harped on it repeatedly, we figured this would be over before week one, and sure enough, it was. And that would be the Roquan Smith saga, where he was holding in, and it's over. It was kind of like the whole KD fiasco, where you feel like you have some sort of leverage, and I'll threaten to do this and this and this. It was different than KD publicly asking for a trade, of course, on the scale of superstardom. But Roquan didn't have the leverage. He dragged the team and continued to drag the team. Recently, in one of his most recent interviews, he said, quote, "I thought it was very distasteful," talking about the lack of negotiations and how they've halted. "Thought it was very distasteful, to say the least. Wasn't what I anticipated, nor what I expected from the situation. But I'm grateful for the fans, all the loyal fans, and everyone, the players as well, in the locker room and the city of Chicago that stood behind me throughout this process. It means a lot to myself. But now I'm just shifting my focus to the season, and more so just focused on being the best teammate I can be to those guys in the locker room," which is what he's said also in that notes thing that got leaked as well, the notes note. And now here we are. He's practiced, and you'll likely see a little bit of action maybe in this last preseason game coming up this Saturday against the Browns. So, leading with that before we even get to the rest of the preseason notes, this is basically what we figured, Ross, and he'll play his rookie deal out and make about $10 million. And then we'll see. He could even get franchised next year. But is this just a bad look for Roquan overall, or can he just go ahead and put this behind him and play good Bears football?
It's probably a combination of both. I think he got a really tough lesson in the last couple of weeks on what not having an agent looks like, and not having a professional sit at the table for you to be at the other end of a business transaction. And I think he took a little bit of a hit, at least in the court of public opinion. I think his worth is probably not what he thought it was, and he had to learn that the hard way. There weren't teams knocking on the door willing to give up a first round pick and a second round pick or even a third round pick and then also give you $100 million. And I think once he found that out, his only choice was to go back to the Chicago Bears. I think the Bears and him are probably a little bit closer than a lot of us expect. I think if Roquan had an agent, the Bears probably would have been able to hammer out a deal with him by now. But, here we are. And, what's best for both parties, in my opinion, is for him to go out there and ball out for 17 games and say, and the Bears say, okay, cool, here's your $100 million, right? Be a model citizen, be a leader in the locker room, be a leader on the defense, go out there and have an all-pro season. And I don't think the team will have any problem giving him $100 million. So, he has to bet on himself, but that's okay. He's not the first athlete we've seen bet on himself. He's not the first athlete that we've seen in Chicago, bet on himself. I think the last, major athlete to do so was Jimmy Butler with the Chicago Bulls, and that worked out very well for Jimmy. So, hopefully it can work out well for Roquan. I think he's going to be a stud in this defense. I'm glad to see him out on the practice field all week. I'm glad to see him going out there playing on Saturday. Because I think his energy and just the way he plays and the ferocity he plays is something that this entire football team really needs.
Yeah, he's still no doubt in my eyes the face of that defense. I know, Eddie Jackson, when he got his big deal, he was certainly way up there as far as that representation, one of the captains. But he's that centerpiece of the defense that the Bears really couldn't do without if they didn't resolve this. And sure enough, it was resolved before the start and him ending his hold. And, it is what it is. And when a player tries to represent themselves, it's a tough situation. And that really didn't do anything as far as the dragging the franchise through the mud. And the Bears just staunchly held their ground. And this is where it's at. You're still making good money and you're still playing for that bigger contract, right? I mean, this season could still be, following up from last season, which was one of Roquan's best. You could still take a step back. So it's tough to see for a guy in his situation, and it's tough for especially linebackers and running backs who bang through the middle of these defenses and hit defensive linemen and offensive linemen. Their shelf life is so long. You see the guys like Luke Kuechly and Patrick Willis, guys like that retiring by 30 for a good reason. Before they even get these huge contracts like that, because their health becomes a bigger concern than all of that, for sure. And please comment along if you have thoughts about this. I know everybody pretty much, as far as the Bears fandom, is super psyched that Roquan will be playing, obviously, and that Bears defense certainly needs him because in injury notes we saw that Jaquan Brisker, he had to undergo surgery for a broken right thumb, and the timetable looks pretty iffy, and I think that Eberflus and company were saying that they're hopeful that Jaquan Brisker will be back for week 1, but I doubt it. I think that the most likely scenario is not to rush it and hopefully get him there by week 3 at the earliest, something like that. But whoever, I'm not a doctor as far as these thumb surgeries go, they could be different. But this defense, segueing into that, Ross, I know that it's just preseason. We're really just shaking out the depth of this roster right now, and then who's going to make the 53 roster. But what'd you see, against Seattle that you liked? What didn't you like? And more thoughts on Brisker.
Yeah, I mean, let's start with Brisker first. I think he's going to be okay. I think, because he plays that safety position, him able to have surgery on that hand sooner than later. There's still like 18 days until the first game of the season. We still have a long ways away, so to speak. So I think that he's going to be able to play with a cast on there.
Have a club, yeah,
and be okay. He'll be fine. In terms of what I like from the defense, listen, I like the way the secondary played. I like the way that they were getting after the quarterback. Most importantly, I think that the Bears as a whole, especially on defense, were just the more prepared team coming into that game. Pete Carroll's a veteran head coach, and he has a Super Bowl underneath his belt. And yet Matt Eberflus's team on both sides, in all three phases, just looked like the more ready, prepared football team. And I think that's a testament early on to this coaching staff and in the kind of training camp they've had. Seattle's going to be a bad football team this year. They've got problems at quarterback. They've got problems on the offensive line. They're going to struggle mightily, but the Bears kept their pressure and the intensity up the entire time. I think you see a lot of guys fighting for still a roster spot in playing time on the roster, and they really came through. But most important to me, it was just the fire and the intensity, and I think that's been generated mostly from head coach Matt Eberflus. We heard Jalen Johnson the other day say he was really skeptical about the hits mentality that Eberflus was bringing in, but then he said he bought in at a later point, and you can see it. This whole team was starting to buy into it, and they were flying all over the football. At first I was a little disappointed that they took out Justin Fields. I wanted to see him go for one more drive because I thought they were gaining momentum, but that was me under the pretenses of thinking that they weren't going to be playing in Cleveland this Saturday. But now that they are, I'm ecstatic the way everything worked out. The Bears still have some work to do on this offensive line in terms of getting them into a cohesive starting five. But all in all, like I said, I can't reiterate enough, the intensity that they brought to that game on the road in Seattle was really impressive for me.
Short week too, right? It's definitely impressive. You see early on, and again, preseason obviously doesn't count. You may be 2-0, but these guys who are starters, they get it, and those who are on the fringe, they really just seem to have bought into Eberflus's system. And talking about the defense, it's nice. You see little bits of a taste, if you will, of what's to come. You see Duke Shelley playing all over the field. You see Al-Qadim Muhammad getting a sack, and you see some depth as far as at linebacker. God forbid anything happens in that middle area as well. You see that, and again on the Brisker note too. Now you'll see with these guys who are next man up type of situation and playing in the nickel, who will move from corner to safety and wherever they need to make the roster. Then you'll see what the depth is like on this team. So you definitely like to see them play with some intensity, where it's a little different from where Matt Nagy was, where you saw guys kind of quit, I feel like, with Nagy in that instance. Talking about guys who need to adjust, we're looking at the offensive line, and now Tevin Jenkins, it's quite the flip of a script for him, and he is poised to looks like he's poised to take that right guard spot over, when it was kind of a question mark if he would even be on the team in early start of training camp at this point. But I mean, he's a mauler. We knew that this guy, there's a lot of expectations out of him, and you don't want to draw comparisons to the past Bears guards like Kyle Long or anything like that. But he looks like he has that sort of dog in him, where he's athletic, and hopefully he can get that experience where if he's needed to move from right guard to left guard or all over, that he can learn a newer position like that. And I think he looked pretty good, Ross, didn't you, against Seattle?
I thought he looked pretty good too. Yeah, I mean, he looked good enough, obviously, to be taking over as the starting right guard over veteran Michael Schofield, who they brought in, who has started a lot of games in this league, right? I think Tevin Jenkins immediately, like you said, brings some nastiness, especially to the run game. I think his run blocking right now is far ahead of his pass blocking, and I can say that about the same thing for Larry Borum as well. But that's okay, because I think the Bears are going to want to run the ball a lot this year. I think they're going to want to set up the play action. So, pass blocking, a lot of that is, a lot of these guys for offensive linemen, they need to go downhill first, and they need to get a groove and get a sweat and get worked up and get their technique right in the running game. And then all of a sudden their feet start moving, they start getting juiced up, and that allows them to be better pass blockers. So I expect Tevin Jenkins, as he gets more comfortable at that right guard's position, to be a better pass blocker, which is all the more important for them to get more reps this Saturday against the Browns, right? Because you want to be ready to go when you see the 49ers. 49ers, they don't play around with that front seven. It's nasty. So you got to be ready to go for when Bosa and Fred Warner and those guys come to town. So, but I'm just proud of Tevin Jenkins. I think back to the fact that, even like 3-4 weeks ago, we thought that, he potentially quit on the team. We thought that he didn't have the want to play football. We thought that he was 1 foot out the door. The Bears were going to trade him for like a 5th-round pick or 6th-round pick, and all of a sudden he's going into the season as your starting right guard. And to me, that's the best thing that you can have, right? This guy is still a young football player. He's only a few games into his NFL career. He missed a lot of his rookie season with an injury. And all of a sudden, if he's your starter, and the same thing with Larry Borom on the right side, that's a huge win for the Bears, right? Because as much as I like the Riley Reef signing and the Michael Schofield signing, those guys are not a part of your future, right? And this year, the wins and losses, they always mean something, but then they really don't. What you care about this year is you need to see a big group of young guys on offense and defense emerge as your core group, so you know what you need to build going forward next season into the draft and free agency.
Yeah, it's good on certainly Tevin Jenkins when he turns around and flips the script, where exactly like we talked about, he looked just kind of immature to people and looked like he again had 1 foot out the door, and he was not going to be a part of this starting offensive line when there were some big expectations, albeit he had the injury history and all that. But he composed himself and embracing, when you go ahead and embrace a new position like that speaks a lot to him too. And he composed himself in press conferences too, and obviously against Seattle, and we'll see even more tape on him against the Browns Saturday. So that's going to be encouraging. What's not encouraging to me is still, and I know a lot of people are going off in the chat about the wide receiver situation as far as who's going to be there to help out Justin Fields. I know it's early with preseason, but it's just a bunch of guys besides Darnell Mooney at this point. And I know someone pointed out that they don't have a lot of high expectations of Cole Kmet. I think between Cole Kmet and Darnell Mooney, there's your 1-2 punch right there for Justin Fields. That's who to focus on. But outside of that, with Felix Jones, he might be that third best weapon. These are our expectations. I mean, I'm hoping that some of these other guys can break out, and one of those guys might be, very much on the fringe, and who's been playing quality minutes in these first 2 preseason games, will play quality minutes in this third one. But with the receivers, do you have any thoughts on how that's materializing, Ross? Are you up on them or down on them?
I mean, let's start with Cole Kmet, right? Cole Kmet last year, only, let's count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 tight ends had more targets than him last year, and he had over 90 targets last year, right? I fully expect him to have the same amount of targets, if not even more, going into this season. The tight end, the touchdown thing is a large part on Matt Nagy and his inability to have an efficient red zone offense.
Terrible red zone.
Yeah, absolutely. And the bulk of the touchdowns, I think the Bears had 6 touchdowns last year by a tight end. Don't quote me on that. But all those guys are gone. The Jesper Horsteds of the world and the Jimmy Grahams of the world. Those are Cole Kmet's reps to have. And I think that Luke Getsy, and you've already seen it in the Seattle game, just gets a lot more creative at getting Cole Kmet wide open looks. And so listen, whether it's on the field, fantasy football, whatever, Cole Kmet is going to be a top 10 tight end this year. He's going to catch over 60 receptions. He's going to have in the neighborhood of 600 to 700 receiving yards. He's going to still have over, in the area of 90 targets. And I fully expect him to have anywhere between 4 to 5 touchdowns a year. And if he does that, that is a top 10 tight end. And listen, those to me are still very pedestrian numbers. In terms of Darnell Mooney is he's not a true number 1 receiver in the league for me, but I think he's a solid receiver. I think he's Justin Fields, obviously number 1. I expect him to have over 1,000 yards receiving this year and have hopefully close to 10 touchdowns, right? And then outside of that, it becomes how many times can you put the ball in Velus Jones' hands, right? He's going to line up all over the field. I think Byron Pringle is going to be back in time for week 1. I know our own Greg Gabriel on the Barroom Network agrees with that. If he wouldn't be, I think the Bears would have made a move already to bring in another wide receiver. In N'Keal Harry, he might miss the first couple of weeks of the season, but he might be back. I know he had that quick surgery to get him back in the football field. And then you've got a veteran like Tajay Sharp, who made an outstanding catch in the first preseason game, right? But listen, your 3 receivers on the field, at least week 1, are going to be Equanimeous St. Brown, Darnell Mooney, and some combination of Pringle and Jones. I think Jones is going to be your gadget guy for most of his rookie season. And then Cole Kmet is going to get a ton of snaps. He's going to be out in the field all the time. Remember, Tungen, the tight end for Green Bay, under the same offense that Luke Getsy ran, had over 10 touchdowns just a couple of years ago, right? You can't tell me that Cole Kmet can't come in and get at least half of those. And Kmet is a much better tight end than Robert Tonyan. So I fully expect Kmet to have a very solid season as a tight end. And if you're playing fantasy football or anything like that, you should, and you don't get one of the big guys, the Travis Kelce's or Kyle Pitts of the world, take a look at Cole Kmet around round 9, round 10, because I think he's going to have a much better season than a lot of people expect.
Be a sleeper for sure. I think, the big point too is we haven't seen a lot of Pringle yet. We just haven't seen a full tape of these guys who are projected to be starters going and playing, a full game of football out there at this point. And so obviously against the Browns, you want to see a little bit more of Justin Fields and that chemistry with Kmet, with Darnell Mooney, and with these other guys who are new acquisitions. And then you see how the offensive line will develop as well.
That's the biggest part.
Yeah. Are you looking forward to seeing about one half of starters play against the Browns?
As long as he's not getting his ass kicked out there.
Yeah, that's the only thing, man. It's obviously a big year for him, and we saw him. He got his dick kicked in a lot last year because of a poor offensive line and scrambling. But he learned, he took his lumps for sure. But the rib thing is a concern as well. But he's got to be protected and get more comfortable in the pocket for sure.
And listen, like Stacey King would say, right? If you're scared, go buy a dog, right? At some point, he's going to have to get hit eventually, right? And I think the biggest thing for Justin Fields is he needs to be able to be comfortable around those 5 guys in front of him. Also, those 5 guys need to know his tendencies and where he's at all times in the pocket. And then Justin Fields, most importantly, he needs to start getting some pocket presence and pocket awareness. He needs to know when he can feel the rush, either on his left side or his right side. He needs to know when he can step up in the pocket and make those little subtle moves a la Tom Brady to the left or to the right to buy himself another second to get the football out of his hands. I think those are things that Justin Fields still has to work out right now in preseason. Those are still some things I saw in that Seattle game. He's got a tendency sometimes to bail out of the pocket a little bit early. He's also, just by his nature, a big fish hunter. He loves pushing the football down the field. He's going to try and see how much he can do that. So those are just some little subtle things that he needs to learn. And why not learn it now while these games don't count? So hopefully he can clean up a lot of those mechanics and things like that going into week 1.
Yeah, no question. And I know it's the portion of the show where we talk about Colin Cowherd shitting on the Bears again here about a former Bear OC talking about it's going to be a rough career for Justin Fields. I don't get that when you could say the same thing. And it was the same thing he said where in the last time we talked about Colin Cowherd's takes where the Bears are stuck in the past and are really trying to pay linebackers and stuck with this whole defensive mind thing. It's a completely different organization at this point. It's a completely different management, I should say, with Ryan Poles and company, completely different coaching strategy now. It's completely different OC. I don't understand it. I think if anything, you got to take the positive road here. And for all these reasons that we've talked about with Justin Fields being poised to have a good second year, but we will see a lot of Justin Fields, hopefully not too much, not getting sacked repeatedly, not getting hit a lot in this Browns game come Saturday. Any other Bears notes that you're hot on right now?
No, I'm just, I'm excited for not only for the Bears, but just for the entire National Football League to just get past this subtle stage that we have of we're so close to meaningful action, but we still have to kind of sift through this bullshit we see, like the Colin Cowherd stuff. Listen, I try and tell Bears fans this on Twitter all the time. It's the 3rd largest market in the NFL, right? But it's also of the 3 largest markets, we only have 1 football team, whereas LA has 2, New York has 2, right? So these guys are feeding the algorithm right now. They know that if you push the buttons of the Bears fans are going to respond. That gets them more clicks, that gets them more impressions, that gets them more interactions. You're literally feeding into what they want right now. Negativity breeds higher viewing and higher stuff like that. So, Cowherd, guys like Cowherd and guys on First Take and stuff like that, they know how to poke the bear, no pun intended, because they know a huge fan base like Chicago is going to get riled up, and that's going to get them more ratings. The more that you can just casually dismiss that stuff and move on from it, it'll go away. And then also, most importantly, we're close to week 1 where we can just figure it the hell out, right? Like we can finally once and for all say, all right, we can now look at the wins and losses and how this thing progresses. That's the thing that I'm most excited about, because all this back and forth banter and bullshit, I can't stand it. It just gets really mundane to me. I promise you, over the last 5 years, Colin Cowherd has probably watched 5 Bears games in that time frame. So
right.
he's a Patriots fan by heart. Yeah, he's watching Red Zone probably all the time on a Sunday. There's no way that he knows it. And Mike Martz, I mean, come on now. Mike Martz, who traded Greg Olsen away so they can sign Brendan Malamaliolis or whatever, so he can be a blocker in that bullshit, throwing Jay Cutler 7-8 steps back and having him get his ass kicked out there. I don't want to hear anything from what Mike Martz has to say, because his tenure in Chicago was just an abject failure.
It was terrible. And it was very forgettable for good reason. Guess how little you can spend to go to this Bears Browns game, Ross?
How little?
Yeah.
$4.
Exactly. $4 with a service fee.
Ooh.
So a little more like $7.
Yeah.
$7 to get in the door. Get it while it's hot in Cleveland.
I gotta tell you, I know the NFL says they do the preseason games for money, but are they really making money at these games? There's a game on right now.
No way.
There's nobody there.
No.
At some point, I really think that it'd be smart to just start doing joint practices going forward, as long as Aaron Donald's not slapping somebody over the head with a helmet, and just really do away with the entire preseason altogether.
I can't imagine. It's just people's thirst for football, right? And then they lost that 4th preseason game. And there's something to be said about seeing football for, the Midwest and East Coast, while the weather's nice out still. But again, $4, like, come on. And these tickets come week 1 are going to jump up to at least like $80 a pop for nosebleed, something like that.
Yeah, I'm going to Packers Bears in Green Bay week 2. But I haven't got my tickets yet, and I just looked on SeatGeek today, and it's like it's a Sunday night game. Obviously, I mean the cheapest ticket right now is like $275 to sit at the top. It's just insane.
The Aaron Rodgers show, gotta see him. You might trip during the game. Pay for that. You're gonna slip him some ayahuasca again. What'd you make of Aaron Donald swinging the Bengals players' helmets around at practice there? That was a wild clip, man. And these joint practices are always spicy. There's always one fight that breaks out. And I did not see what started that. Did you, Ross, as far as what player got into it with Donald and why you would pick a fight with Aaron Donald?
No, I didn't see it. But, I mean, a couple of things with that. Maybe, number one, you don't put the 2 Super Bowl teams against each other in a joint practice. There's probably still a lot of bad blood left over from that game. That's probably number one. Number 2, Aaron Donald is fucking batshit crazy. Anybody that goes out there and trains with a guy who has knives all over the place and he's throwing knives at you and stuff like that, he is not to be messed with. So we've seen Aaron Donald before rip the helmets off of guys. He just listen. The guy plays nasty. The guy plays with an intensity that's really unmatched throughout the NFL. And it's no surprise to me that if it's 85 degrees outside and he's going against a team that he just beat for the Super Bowl and they're pissed off and they're trying to make a point and a name for themselves, saying that they'll be back there, and things probably got a little bit heated. So it happens. Luckily for Aaron Donald, joint practices are not mandated by the league. They don't police that thing. So, or else he would be looking at a severe suspension, in my opinion, very close to what Myles Garrett got, right? But because the Rams are the ones that are going to police him, I promise you, Aaron Donald's going to probably get a vet day tomorrow, and he might get fined about $50,000, and they'll keep it pushing.
That's assault, brother. What are you doing over there? So the ESPN was saying that a Rams defender who was unable to be identified from a distance was engaged with Bengals right tackle Lyle Collins. Then the defender had Collins wrapped up from behind, arms around his chest, seconds after Cincinnati running back Joe Mixon was a few yards downfield. And Collins took exception and swung punches once he was free.
Well, Collins is not a small man either. That's a big man.
That's a big boy right there. There's a lot of big guys in that whole mosh pit that we just saw on the screen here. But the Cincinnati Enquirer photographer getting Aaron Donald swinging those helmets around like he's defending the wall. That was wild, man. That was wild. Don't mess with him.
Again, reason number 909. We just need week 1 to hurry the hell up and get here.
Yeah.
These guys are over it. We're all over it. It's like, all right, let's just get week 1. Let's get that Thursday night game rolling. Let's get it on.
Yes, sir. I agree with that. Is there a reason why Tom Brady should even play in a preseason game? I'm hearing now that he's playing in the Bucs preseason finale. Why?
No, but I guess he took 10 days off, so he probably feels like he's got to shake off a little bit of rust after sitting on the beach with Giselle and his beautiful children for a week. So, listen, Tom Brady's 45 years old. He can do whatever the hell he wants at this point, right? If he wants to play in a preseason game, let him go out there and play. So he's another guy who's got to get some reps in behind a really sketchy offensive line right now because they've been hit really hard with some injuries on that offensive line. So he's going to kind of learn those new guys up front too. So I kind of don't blame him either.
The center position is a big question mark right now with dealing with injuries there. And that's going to be huge because we know Tom Brady is very specific about how his center handles his balls. Moving on.
Dad jokes.
Well, the top 5 today, Ross, top 5 wide receivers. And this is a tough one, man. We have a lot of talent out there. And I always, I start with some honorable mentions as far as this goes. And, we could do tight ends, but you talk about production and, Mark Andrews was almost top 5 in the league as far as receiving yards and targets. I mean, it was pretty incredible what he did last season, albeit in a down season for Lamar Jackson. And man, he is way up there. But as far as receivers go, we saw Tyreek Hill, and he's just doing his thing. We'll see how he rebounds from being 7th in the league and receiving into a new system with Tua and Miami, and after getting paid big time. Tyler Lockett's always in that conversation, but now it's like we talked about. Him and DK Metcalf are just in such a shitty situation with whoever's going to be, Geno Smith throwing them the football at this point. Talk about DJ Moore, guys like Mike Williams. We'll see, you could easily see, right, like a Keenan Allen or Mike Williams jump into maybe this top 5 with a guy like Justin Herbert throwing to him, of course. And then you always talk about the guys who Tom Brady's been throwing to. And Mike Evans had a great year as far as touchdown catches go, but and as yardage goes too. I mean, in his whatever this is 7th, 8th year, something like that, is pretty incredible. But on to the top 5. My number 5, Ross, is Stephon Diggs.
Oh.
And man, I like what he does, and I was just reading a great article about him and his brother Trayvon, and it's always cool to see these football families, and they both went to Maryland and super competitive, just lived, obviously competing with each other. Trayvon just a few years in, but he's just been the model of consistency. Obviously had great years in Minnesota, and then getting traded to a Super Bowl favorite now in the Bills. He's got that edge. He's got these acrobatic catches that he makes. He's got Josh Allen throwing to him, a great route runner. He had a great season last year when he was, like 8th in the league in receiving yards. He had 10 touchdowns, but really it seems to be peaking at the right time. And he's just one of those guys who's fun to watch, got great celebrations. He's my number 5.
He is also my number 5.
But look at that.
Look at that. Listen, last 2 seasons in Buffalo, over 2,700 yards receiving and 18 touchdowns. And mind you, that is in Buffalo. It is cold as fuck in Buffalo. It snows in Buffalo. It's like negative 25 out there, and he's still putting up just insane numbers through the air out there. It's a testament to his skill set. He's awesome. He comes from Minnesota to Buffalo. He's the perfect complement for Josh Allen because he's got the deep game. He's got that intermediate game and can run after the catch. But When Stephon Diggs was in Minnesota, I thought he was a good football player. But obviously, as we now see, he was kind of handcuffed a little bit by Kirk Cousins because he has just exploded even more since linking up with Josh Allen in Buffalo. And even though Brian Daboll is now in with the Giants, I don't anticipate that tandem slowing down one bit this year. I think Ken Dorsey is going to step in as a new offensive coordinator for the Bills, and those guys will continue to light it up. And Stephon Diggs got new paper this year, and that is well deserved. He's my number 5 as well.
Some of the best cleats in the game.
Yes.
Don't sleep on those cleats either, my friend.
Yes.
Number 4.
Number 4.
Man, these LSU boys are different. Jamar Chase, and I know it's just one rookie season, and him and Joey B are best buddies, man, and linking up in the pros after college. That's so cool to see. It was a breakout year. He had a little over 1,400 yards. Third in the league in touchdown catches on only 81 receptions is just bananas. 18 yards a catch. That was good for second in the league. Again, just these LSU wide receivers are built different, and they're the best in the league in my eyes. And spoiler alert, in this list, there's not a guy over 6'3", but these guys all play as the total packages, right? Where they run crisp routes and Chase just to go. I feel like there's an adjustment for a lot of guys, but you see with Jamar Chase, there was not a ton of time needed to adjust to the speed of the NFL game. And Joe Burrow, I think it speaks to that relationship that they had too. And maybe if he was on a different team, he had some different quarterback thrown to him, he would be off this list, or he wouldn't have that same production. But, after being fourth in the league in receiving yards and putting all those numbers up that I mentioned earlier, putting up just really great rookie numbers, on par to be offensive rookie of the year for sure. Mm-hmm. It's the expectations are really high in the second season. I'm wondering if he takes a step back. But the Bengals, it's like we talked about, they are a year removed from the Super Bowl, and they're certainly one of those powers of the AFC. But he's number 4 for me, and he could be even higher on your list, Ross.
He is higher on my list. Spoiler alert, Jamar Chase is number 3 for me, just because I'm betting on what he's going to do going forward. Listen, I think he's one of the most electric, dynamic athletes in the NFL. Just think about the same time last year, exhibit 909 again, why preseason is bullshit. The same time last year, we were saying that Jamar Chase had an issue with the dropsies, and he wasn't learning the offense in Cincinnati, and they got Tyler Boyd, and yada, yada, yada. This guy went out there and had one of the most dynamic rookie seasons we've seen in a long time, and I think he's only going to build from that. I think he was absolutely awesome when in the crunch time down the stretch for them. I think he was awesome in the playoffs. Him and Joe Burrow are amazing together. Obviously, that was the guy that Burrow fought for, his former college teammate, to get him in Cincinnati. So I think the arrow is pointing directly up for Jamar Chase. I just like him because he's got great weapons around him. Sure. Like Boyd, even like Joe Mixon, stuff like that. And he's still put up amazing numbers, which is why I have him in front of my number 4, who is Justin Jefferson, another LSU guy. The guy that was essentially traded for Stephon Diggs, our number 5, right? And listen, Jefferson had better stats last year than Jamar Chase, but when you kind of look at things, right, Thielen was out for a big chunk of the year with injuries. Jefferson's targets were 167 last year, which is even high up from his 125 his rookie season. So, people will tell you, well, he had 108 catches. Like, no shit, he had 167 targets. He was just force-fed the football a ton, and he still had an amazing season. He had 10 touchdowns as well and over 1,600 yards. But I got Chase in front of him strictly because I think Chase did more, or close to the same with less targets than Jefferson did. But I'm still a huge Jefferson fan. I think he's dynamic. I think it's going to be really interesting to see what he does in this new offense this year with new head coach McCartney, and then also at what point does he start to kind of maybe sour a little bit on Kirk Cousins, and Minnesota's going to have to make a decision there on whether they're going to keep Jefferson and pay him close to $30 million a year, which probably means they're going to have to also move on from Kirk Cousins.
Kirk Cousins getting up there too, for sure. That's tough. It's similar to the days of Randy Moss. Though we'll get to that. Number 3 for me is Cooper Kupp, and I mean, just look at last year where he had the Triple Crown. He had over 1,900 yards, almost 2,000 yards, 145 receptions. He had 16 touchdowns, all good for best in the league. Helped that he had a new quarterback in Matt Stafford, clearly, because what a bounce back from the previous year where he basically doubled his production. I mean, albeit it was a little bit of injury in the COVID list at that time. But, think of all that potential, and then to be this productive, we certainly thought that he had this potential, but man, just dropping almost 2,000 season like that, again, with weapons around him, with Odell Beckham Jr. around him, and the rest of these great, talented skill position players around Matt Stafford and the rest of this Rams offense. I mean, he earned every bit of that fat, 3-year, $80 million deal with that, and got the Super Bowl ring out of it. It's just the type of thing where was underrated with that production too. And you talk about the targets and everything that goes into it. He was targeted 191 times where they were force feeding him the football. It was just nuts. And I mean, Matt Stafford had a plethora of wide receivers and good position players, talented players to throw to pad his stats at that point and be a security blanket. But Cooper Kupp never shied away. You look at throughout the regular season and into the playoffs, and obviously in the Super Bowl, playing in that largest stage too. It was nothing short of amazing. It was one of those years too where you certainly rooted for him to also get that 2,000-yard mark, but damn, he was just short. But he had 2 touchdowns in the Super Bowl. I mean, he's way up there right now. I mean, again, he could be. I'm sure he's higher on your list at this point, Ross.
He's my number 2 wide receiver, and again, the same time last year, we were talking about. It was probably going to be Matthew Stafford to Robert Woods. We thought that was going to be the number 1 combo, right? And Cooper Kupp just emerged as this amazing weapon. And what I love best about Cooper Kupp is he lines up all over the football field. He lines up at the Y, he lines up at the X, he lines up in the slot. He doesn't care, and he is a matchup nightmare for defensive backs. Great in the short game, great in the intermediate game, but he can also stretch the football field. I think the Bears saw that firsthand, last year and how great he was. Like you said, took away the Triple Crown last year. But to me, what was more impressive was when the Rams needed a touchdown to win the football game, it was a steady diet of Cooper Kupp for that final touchdown for them, all the way up, including that defensive penalty that they got, which set up the touchdown for them. That was eventually the game-winning touchdown. I know he's got Allen Robinson there now, but in my opinion, that's only going to help Cooper Kupp. That's going to take a little bit. Yeah. That's going to give him a little bit more one-on-one coverage, right? And I fully expect Allen Robinson to have a really good year, but he ain't going to have a Cooper Kupp year. And Cooper Kupp is still going to be an elite wide receiver. I'm a huge fan of his. He's only 29 years old, I believe. So he should still be able to play at a high level for a couple more years. The guy is just also a physical freak of nature too. So he's my number 2.
Yeah, you got it right on the money, Ross. 29 years old. Cliff, to his point, is it a plus or minus for Kupp as far as Allen Robinson going over there? We know that I think that it will be certainly not the same. He's not going close to 2,000 yards. If he does, I mean, put him in the hall. It's unbelievable, but he's not going to come close to that sort of production when you have those guys. And if the old Beckham situation is still fluid, if he was to come back, but that would be a hell of a lineup there. Allen Robinson and him are poised to both have over 1,000-yard seasons, and LA looking to run it back at this point. Obviously, that'll be something. Number 2 for me is in a New Jersey this year, and he goes from being Aaron Rodgers' security blanket to linking up with Derek Carr, and that's Devontae Adams to me. And I really just see, like, again, all these receivers are 6'1", 6'2". They all have great speed, but a guy like Adams plays bigger. He makes these great catches in the end zone, great sideline catches, and certainly had the benefit of obviously playing with Aaron Rodgers, but consistent, man. Like, certainly good with the deep ball. He would go over the middle. He was a year removed from catching 18 touchdown passes from Aaron Rodgers. He was second in the league in receptions this past year with 123. I think he had his best production And now we'll see if that stays steady. And I really do think it will, because Derek Carr is hitting that prime. And Devontae Adams is right there too. Again, this was that year where we see a lot of these wide receivers getting paid so much money. And I have no doubt he'll excel in Vegas. The only thing that makes me second guess this position is him having played 8 years in the league already. At what point do you start to have a bit of a downturn, right? But he doesn't seem like he's slowing down, and I think he's aging like wine as far as this goes. And a breath of fresh air. I think again, we've talked about it in previous podcasts too. We're seeing Aaron Rodgers kind of on that downturn and his stock going down, where we're seeing the Raiders, it's definitely going up, and Derek Carr and him should be real fun to watch this year.
Completely agree. That's why he's my number one. Devontae Adams is my number one. Listen, he's still only 29 years old, so he's the same age as Cooper Kupp, which is just crazy to think about. But since 2017, one guy has led the NFL in receptions, receiving yards, and touchdowns, and that's Devontae Adams. He leads in all three categories since 2017: 432 receptions, 5,300 receiving yards, and 47 touchdowns. And yes, I know he's moving on from a first ballot Hall of Fame player, but he's going into a much better situation, I think, for him going forward. And I think he knew that, which is why he got out of Green Bay. I think if he wants to extend his career, he had to get out of the cold in Green Bay, away from a nut job like Aaron Rodgers, who we don't know what the hell he's doing from time to time, and he's probably smoking mushrooms right now and some shit. And he moves to Las Vegas, which is closer to where he's from. He links up with his college quarterback, who's one of his best friends. And then also, I don't think it's been said enough. Listen, say what you want about Josh McDaniels, but he gets his best offensive players the football, right? We've seen that from time to time during his time in New England. Even when he was head coach of the Broncos, right? Even Brandon Marshall still had a great year with Josh McDaniels in that offense. And then I think Hunter Renfrow is the perfect complement to Devontae Adams. These are the best possession receiver in the NFL right now. Darren Waller is an awesome tight end. I think that offense is going to be really fun. I think they're in a division where the points are going to be absolutely just flying on the board, right? I think you're going to see a lot of 35 to 38 scoring games in the AFC West, and I think Devontae Adams is going to be a huge part of that. You get him indoors on that turf, oh my goodness! And then he also gets to play in the with the Charger Stadium and stuff like that. I think Devontae Adams is going to be a huge year. I'm just a big fan of his. I was watching a video of him earlier. He was on the I Am Athlete podcast, and they were asking him, what he does. He says, "Listen, I line up from these DBs, and I set them up in my mind before the play even snaps, and I know what they're going to do. I know what they're going to do to me, and I know what I'm going to do to them." But I'm a huge fan of his. I'm so happy he's not in Green Bay anymore, because I can finally root for that guy without having the animosity of him wearing a Packers uniform.
Making Bears defenses look silly for years. Finally, there's a little bit of relief, and hopefully you're not seeing Alan Lazard step into those shoes for sure. Did we get your number two? I spaced out.
My number two was Cooper Kupp.
It was Cooper Kupp. No, makes sense.
Yeah.
And
I went Diggs. What did I do? I went Diggs, Jefferson, Chase, Kupp, Adams.
Look at that. We have the same list, just in different order. Number one for me is the man who made the gritty so popular, Double J, Justin Jefferson. He's just electric, man. The total package. Again, only 2 years, like him and Jamar Chase, so young, but they're going to be taking over this league for the foreseeable future. When he's already following in Randy Moss's footsteps, and he looks like he's again only 2 years in, but he's going to be on pace to try and break a bunch of these records. His stock is so high right now, and only 2 seasons under his belt, but at 1,600 yards last year, 10 touchdowns. He is it, man. The only question again is just Kirk Cousins throwing him the ball, and if that will be sustainable at this point. But man, he was something to watch last year, and the year before. He's just a breakout star, and definitely worthy of. All these guys are poised to be in obviously the top 5 of receiving yards and all these milestones. You know, what's surprising to me is I feel like we can't put him there as Deebo Samuel was not on this list just because he's such a flex, like a gimmick, not a gimmick player, but him and Cordell Patterson. They don't define the position, right? Or they break outside of the box.
So I was literally just about to say, we did our top 5, but don't sleep on Deebo Samuel this year to maybe sneak into that list. But like you just hit it on the head, he's such a Swiss Army knife. You don't know where he's going to line up at and where those yards come from. But listen, the guy is still a wide receiver. He still had well over 1,000 yards from the receiving position last year. But I am a huge Deebo Samuel fan. So I think if we're just talking top 5 weapons in the NFL, Deebo Samuel is certainly in my top 5 list. Yeah. But I was going to say, don't sleep on Deebo Samuel this year because they paid him. And they're gonna use him for sure this year. He's gonna have a big year.
He had 1,400 yards receiving, and then still rushing was. He had a few touchdowns. It was nuts the way that how versatile he is, and it's great to see players do that. You want to see that more.
100%.
Very nice. We're wrapping up the show in these final 10 minutes here, and we talked about. I mentioned KD earlier, and what a fiasco that was, him requesting this trade and saying he's unhappy in Brooklyn and saying, I'm going to threaten to retire. And then lo and behold, I'm going to play for Brooklyn. No big deal. And now I just think, it's not the right place for him. I don't know at this point. It's just, KD is such a perplexing guy. It's that whole, obviously, dynamic of him and Kyrie with these personalities that just don't seem to, I don't know, mesh, or their minds are just elsewhere and not focused on the court. I mean, they're both some of the best players in the league, but it's just odd to think that he will totally be invested in trying to bring a championship to Brooklyn this year. But KD does what KD does.
It is, and I mean, at the moment,
breaking Chet Holmgren's foot out here.
Oh my God, no, that was LeBron. LeBron did.
Oh, that's LeBron. I'm sorry.
Yeah, LeBron did that. Yeah, he doesn't have a choice because he was the one that picked. Right. He picked Kyrie Irving, and he picked Brooklyn, and he picked Steve Nash, and he picked this entire situation. And after the Rudy Gobert trade went down, the whole trade market just got tanked. And so you don't even know what KD's value is. Never mind the fact that he's been in the league like 16 years now. He's got 3 very significant injuries, very similar to the Roquan Smith situation. His only option was to go back to Brooklyn. Right, so we'll see how this plays out. I'm not convinced that either him or Kyrie stay there, maybe through this season or even next year. But for now, as we're about to enter training camp for the NBA in like 3 or 4 weeks. There's no other option for KD. He had to go back to Brooklyn, at least for now, until they figure out something else.
He did, and again, they could be tops of the Eastern Conference just based on those 2 guys alone at this point. But it was something else, and that's the thing with these offseason storylines too. And of course, another big one for the NBA right now is everything going into Pat Beverly and the whole Lakers show. Of course, every year that LeBron is in the league, he's going to be dominating headlines and the cast around him. Now look at this. You got Pat Bev in this 3-and-D guard, Patrick Beverly. It's something else, man. And then the expectations for Russell Westbrook are pretty high right now, and a lot of slander on him. I don't know if I'm hot on Russ anymore.
I just read a report from one of the Lakers beat writers for The Athletic that with the Pat Beverly signing, they're probably going to try and really trade Russell Westbrook or just do the John Wall thing and send him home and pay him to sit on the sofa. And I think that's mostly because you can't have those 2 guys in practice every day. They're going to beat the shit out of each other. It's going to be like, you talk about LA, it's going to be like Bloods versus Crips. I mean, those guys are 2 high-strung personalities. There's no way that they will last 82 seasons in the same locker room with each other without smacking the shit out of each other. So one of them has got to go, and I think that's going to be Westbrook.
Ooh, man, quite the end for the Lakers era of Russell Westbrook right there. Enough of the sports, Ross. Are you watching House of Dragon? Are you into it already?
I haven't
watched it yet.
I have watched the first 10 minutes. I turned it off. I wasn't in the mood for it yet. I was watching it like in the middle of the day. I feel like
you said you stopped it.
Yeah, I stopped it. I wasn't in the mood for it. You know what it was? We've talked about this before. The first 10 minutes of the episode was so CGI. It was so CGI, and I was just like, I have fake like background fatigue. I've got fake. All the Marvel stuff has ruined me. But I will watch it. I will catch up. I will watch the first episode before episode 2 comes out on Sunday. I promise.
There you go. We will as well, or I will as well. I'm all in on that. You know, I was just talking with friends about how all this fantasies, all these streamers are really banking big on fantasy. Of course, Amazon paying big bucks to get the Lord of the Rings series coming up very soon, and now we got an interview with the vampire show coming out.
Which I'm all in on that.
Love it.
I read that book as a kid.
They got the leader of the Unsullied playing one of the vampires. The vampire.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Nothing's gonna top the movie though. That cast was ridiculous.
Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise. That's the first time Kirsten Dunst ever acted in a movie.
Yeah, that is unbelievable, man. Music World, Jid coming out with an album, and then Kenny Beats is going to have an album. Kenny Beats behind a lot of my favorite music right now. He worked with Vince Staples on FM, which was a great album, and then he's had a bunch. But to see what he'll put out with his first studio album should be interesting. And then Jid, I love, like, one of the best rappers under 30 right now. You know, probably number 2 to J. Cole on Dreamville. He is a stud. I'm looking forward to that dropping tomorrow.
Absolutely. Good Labor Day vibes music. Good barbecue music coming up.
Oh yes. Terrell Owens ran a 4.4 at 48 years old. My God.
He's a phenomenal athlete. Just for him to be able to do that is impressive. I'd be lucky if I could run a 5.2 right now at almost 41 years old in a couple weeks.
I would, an Achilles would snap her. Nobody wants to see that. Yeah, that's no bueno. What else, Ross?
I think we got everything. So, you know, how do you feel about the Cubs giving a send off to their arch nemesis, Albert Pujols and Yadier Molina?
That's funny. I feel fine about it. They've really, I mean, Cubs fans have dealt a lot with Yachty and Albert Pujols over these years. A lot of sadness has been because of their acts on the field. I mean, both Hall of Fame, caliber players. Certainly Pujols, Yadier Molina is great as well. Yeah, you hate the Cardinals if you're a Cubs fan, but you can't honor them. That's fucked up. That's what I would have to say about that.
Right.
Well, thanks to everybody for listening in here on the Barroom Network. All the great shows that are here. All of our shows are previously on YouTube, on Spotify, and iTunes. Wherever you get your media, check us out and mash that like button. I'm at The Real Evan Mac on Twitter. Ross is at Ross Reed. We got more great programming coming up later tonight. We got the Bear Debate at 8:30 p.m. Bear Necessities at 10. All Central Time, of course. And you see the Bears improving to 3-0 and in the preseason come Saturday, Ross.
I think so. And
Beat the Browns.
I think Kevin Fishbane tweeted this out earlier. If they do go undefeated in the preseason, the last time they did that, they made the playoffs. So fingers crossed. Beat the Browns.
You get a participation medal for winning the preseason, going 3-0.
That's right.
There should be some incentive, I feel like.
There should be, absolutely. Listen. You take wins any way you can get them when you were really bad a year ago.
Yes, sir. And thank you to the Barflies for chiming in throughout the show. For now, we say deuces, everybody. So long.
Have a good night.